We're pastors' wives. These are the last days. We don't have a lot of time for this nonsense anymore. Stop it. Just stop it. And if you're still dealing with it, don't you go out those doors with this, because I want you to know if you do, you're being willfully disobedient. The Lord's been speaking to you. Now Jean's coming up. We're going to have communion. You still have time. It's our prayer that you leave here after you touch his robe. Wow, this retreat has been really special for me. A lot of things happened since the last time we were here, just 1 year ago. And especially to stand here where Sharon was last year. You know, she shared about heaven and her vision about heaven. When she talked about that pure, crystal clear, cold water, and that all her family was there, I seriously couldn't even move. I couldn't even breathe, just looking at her. Just like Lauren said, she taught us how to live, but she was sharing with us how she was dying. I mean, that was such a gift. The Lord showed her heaven, and little did I know, sitting right there, that 3.5 months later, my own husband would be on the shores of that crystal lake. He had been sick for a very long time with cancer, but healed of cancer, but complications from the chemotherapy led into some complications that took his life. I just found out this morning, at 7:30 this morning, that on the way to surgery, right before he died, that the ER nurse that rolled him into surgery, Jeff was asking her, in all the excruciating pain he was in, he asked her, "How can I pray for you?" So like June said, hey, we just have to take advantage of who's around us. Every time we can minister, we need to take advantage of that. So it's with a heavy heart I share this study, a lot about my testimony. But I was thinking about Sharon's gone, my husband's gone, Steve's been with the Lord for 10 years, Jeanette's gone, Pastor Chuck and Kay, they're all there. So we've got a Calvary Chapel just waiting for us. They're all there. What a blessing. And I know Sharon be very proud of this conference. She planned it, she put it together, and I hope that we have done her justice. I hope we have, and I think we did. But we truly don't know what tomorrow will bring. In a room of this many people, there will be some tragedies this next year. Not to scare you, and I don't even think you can actually be prepared. How do I be prepared? Well, we just have to prepare our core. It's who we are. Because when these things happen, we don't have time to react. Sometimes we don't even have time to cry out. We just have to be who we are. And if we're women that have been close to the Lord, we're going to know how to handle these things when they happen. That's what I've been holding on to, is just leaning in. We were getting ready to transition. We had transitioned. We were going to Israel. We were going to be transitioning from being a pastor and pastor's wife to being missionaries in Israel, blessing Israeli believers. Now, I still want to do that, and I'm praying and hoping and believing that that's what God has called me to do. 7 months a widow, married 55 years, 50 years at the same church. I know. Same town in Downey, where Jeff and I grew up. We used to swim in the reservoir by my house. We played Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher. And Jeff would pull on my long, blonde pigtails. He called me Carrot, because I always had this, messed up hair. But when I had hair. But I want to thank you all for your cards, your letters, your texts, your notes, your flowers. You don't know how much that means to us. If you came to my kitchen, all those scriptures, I cut them out and put them all over my cabinets with Scotch tape. Yes, Bethany, with Scotch tape. That's a little joke. Okay, so now I'm a widow, but I really believe I'm still a pastor's wife. Because, we're like nurses. We just always are going to be pastor's wives. That's just who we are. And that's who I am. I've been going to Grief Share. It's an organization that helps people that are grieving. Boy, I didn't like it at first. I called Marilee. I said, I don't like this group, Grief Share. You know what they do? They just talk about grieving. I just thought, well, I'm not going to this. But every Monday night, I found myself driving down to the church, getting dressed, and realizing, listen, these people know something I don't know. These people have been through this longer than I have, and they have things that they want to share with me. And they were so nice, they were so kind, they wanted to guide me. Gail, oh man, Gail, you don't know. I can't look at you right now, I'll cry. And the board, all of you guys, gosh, my Calvary pastors' wives, Peggy, Olga, Heather, what a blessing. Our new pastor and his wife, what a blessing, what a support. We need that. What a support. And Lauren, oh man, we agape you. In Hebrew, it's ahava, love. Sharon would be really so very proud of you. So anyway, so now I'm a widow, and that word just makes me feel old, just the word. Some days I feel older than maybe I am, and I pout sometimes, and I feel like an old crow. And I had an app, we have apps that make us look younger or older. Well, I know what I looked like when I was younger, so I wanted to see what I looked like when I was going to be older. So, you take your picture, and then you press. I'm from the 60s, so you think shaking the phone will, And it was just the same picture. That might be a compliment. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. At the time, I felt great. So my girls come over that day and said, Mom, get out of this chair. Get up. So they're pulling me up by both arms. And they say, listen, there's a new antique store we're going to take you to. I said, oh, great. I don't know. I just want to stay home. And no, you're going to really like this antique store. All right, well, what's the name of it? She goes, Forever Antique. Oh, I'm dying to go there. She goes, no, come on. Don't you want to buy something? I go, well, I'm looking for a cutting board, an old cutting board, so let's go. So we walk in. It's a new store, and I'm looking around, Forever Antiques, and this lady who I think was dressed for Halloween, but she just normally looks like this. And she goes, welcome. Can I help you with anything? And I'm kind of looking for a, cutting board. She goes, oh, okay. So this place was full of taxidermy, lions, tigers, and bears. And she starts walking toward me. She's got a tape measure around her neck. And I said to my kids, we got to get out of here. I think she wants to keep me. So we're leaving, and she goes, leaving so soon? And I said, what about the cutting board? And I'm going, yeah. And Tara goes, come on, let's go in the back. And they go, so we left, and I felt like Frankenstein. It was like, so we left, and she goes, leaving so soon? I go, yeah. I said, it's a little stuffy in here. So we went to Savers. Save hers. So I felt better. I felt better there. So anyway, turn to Mark 5:24. My study this morning is on the woman with the issue of blood. This is taken from 3 Gospels: Matthew 9:20 through 22, Mark 5:20 through 34. That's the longest account we have is in Mark. That's why I had you turn there. And then, of course, Luke 8:43 through 48. Now, all these Gospels were written very, very quickly. These writers point out right away, there was a woman, and she had an issue of blood, and she was bleeding for 12 years. That was her identity. She was a woman, and she was bleeding. Now, why did the gospel writers write that? Well, because they wanted us to know that her situation as a Jewish woman was very, very different. There was no place for this woman in society. She was considered unclean. And the writers wanted us to know what that meant: no contact with her. But according to Leviticus 15:19 through 33, there's a very detailed account of instructions regarding women and their monthly cycle. And during that time, she would be considered unclean. That was just normal Levitical law. However, Leviticus 15:25 said if the flow continued past the customary time or over the normal time, all the days that it would be continued, and this was very adamant in verse 25, she is unclean. No contact with her. Everything this woman touched, unclean. Her clothes, her bed, her chair, her hair, her shoes, her dishes, pots and pans, everything is unclean. And if she went out on the street, people were to shout, unclean, unclean, and they would hold on to the walls. If you touched her accidentally or happened to touch her, there was another whole set of stuff that you had to go through to become clean again if you had just touched her. So because of this, this woman became a hassle. You know, I don't want to touch her. I got to go through all this, and I got to do that. I got to go to the mikvah. I got to do this. So people just said, you know, it's probably just really better off that you stay in hiding. Now, solitary confinement, we know in prisons, is a horrible punishment. It's the worst thing you can do to a prisoner is put him in dark, in solitary confinement, because it causes you to have severe anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. This poor lady was alone, no human touch for 12 years. Now you think about it, 12 years. No hugs, no warm marital nights, no kisses, no snuggles, never to be able to hold a baby or a child. This was the Mosaic law, and it was to be upheld. And she had to live her life in this type of hiding. In addition to, I don't know how she handled in those days the whole situation of what that was like. This issue, writers called it the issue. It swallowed up her finances in her desperate attempt to get well. In Mark 5:26, it says she suffered greatly under doctors' care, but she got worse. Who knows what those doctors did to her? But they took her money. They took all of her money. The word suffered in the Greek in this particular text describes an emotional, mind-bending torment. Her life, her actions, her thoughts, all revolved around one thing: the issue. It was ever before her, and the bleeding itself made her feel weak and tired. There was a lot of fatigue, blood pressure problems when you have that kind of problem. It was chronic. She had a chronic problem. Have you ever had an issue that defined you? Something that hindered you or is hindering you? Sapping you of life or strength? A weakness, maybe a habit. We've talked about a lot of things over this last 3 days. Lies that you believe about yourself and your ministry, your abilities, something that maybe is hidden, something hidden in your life. You feel like nobody knows, but it makes you feel unclean, an addiction. And you've lived for years with this. It comes between you and your husband, your intimacy, your closeness with him. The issue, you're not good enough. It comes between you and your church and your ladies in your church. And you've made room for it. We make room for issues. We kind of learn to live with them. We make excuses for them. You've tried and tried and tried and tried to deal with this. But every time you've tried to deal with it on your own, you've failed. But I want you to know that there's others around you that know that there's something wrong. You can't hide this kind of stuff. The Lord always sends a Nathan. There's always the Nathan. Thank God, huh? Thank God for the Nathans that just tell you the truth. You're the man, you're the woman, and this is the problem. And hopefully when you hear these things, you'll deal with them right away. Expose it to the truth. There's always a way out from stopping the bleeding. In the early 70s, Jeff and I were led by the Holy Spirit to leave Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and go back to our hometown in Downey to start a work there. Our kids were little, and it was getting a hassle to drive back and forth down the freeway to go to church. And Jeff wanted to be down there every night. And it's just, the Lord just, we had to find something closer to home. So Jeff was offered a job as a youth pastor at a highly, highly Pentecostal Assembly of God church. Now, I love this church. I love the people. I was never afraid of what was going on. It was a little crazy. I would never invited my parents there. But I don't know. There was just something about it that I liked. And I made friends there. And I didn't know how to make friends, so I thought, I'm going to go to the women's prayer meeting. Because that's where you make friends. When you pray with people, you get close to people. So I went to the women's prayer meeting, and do you know I still have these friends today? I do. And then, I think I was 22 or 23, and being at this church, I was contacted by a highly Pentecostal women's group called Women's Aglow. Anybody older here remember Women's Aglow? Oh, now you talk about Pentecostal and flying all over the place. But still, I wasn't afraid of it. I go, yeah, I'll go. I liked the moving of the things in the Spirit. I liked it. So they asked me to be the vice president of our brand new chapter of the Women's Aglow in Downey. They said, would you like to be the vice president? And hey, I was 22, yeah. So, I prayed about it. We sent out invitations, and we rented the fanciest restaurant in Downey, the Silver Saddle. 300 women showed up that night on the first night. Oh, man, was the attention on me. And I was giving the announcements. And they said, this is just a record breaker for Women's Aglow. So I come up to the microphone just like this, and something happened that had never happened to me in my life. I was gripped with fear. I was overcome. I was experiencing something I had never, ever experienced before. I didn't know what was happening to me. I choked through the announcements, and I sat down. I go, Mom, what was that? she's a drama teacher. My mom was. And she said, oh, honey, that's stage fright. I said, oh, I've never had that before. 10 years I had been in drama workshop and Downey Children's Theater. I always got the leads. But this was different. This wasn't stage fright. Something was very, very wrong. Even my drama teacher, who went to the Assembly of God Church where we went, she was baffled. She goes, listen, I've known you since you were 10 years old. I don't know what's wrong with you, but something was very wrong, and I was very terrified. Well, what I didn't know is I had developed, actually in 1 month, full-blown agoraphobia, which is, you're afraid to go outside or talk to people. This isn't really good for a pastor's wife to have, that you're afraid of people. But I was full of fear, panic, hiding. I was so embarrassed. I became a phenomenal liar. Because when the panic attacks would hit, I would have to say something to leave. I was constantly looking for exits wherever I went. Constantly, if I went in a room, it was like, where's the door? Or I'm sick, I got a stomach ache, where's the bathroom? Chewing gum, so you wouldn't see my lips shake. I knew all the tricks, but nothing helped. Like this woman, I went to many doctors, pastors, and I would go in and talk to the pastors and say, I'm having fear. And of course, you know what they would say? Well, fear is not of the Lord. Well, that's why I'm here. I kind of figured that out, that this is not good. And then a friend of mine, Dr. Browning, sent me to another therapist, and nothing was helping me. I could go outside, I could go out and talk to people, but if the panic attack happened, most of the time it would happen in the market. I don't know, I don't understand it, because fear is very unreasonable, but every time I would smell fruit, I would have a panic attack in the market, and I just leave my cart and go home. But my lips were constantly shaking, and then one day, Kay calls and says, would you like to be a part of the pastor's wife's retreat planning board? And I'm just going, oh man, well, I don't know, I have this issue. And she goes, well, come on down, see what would you like to come? And I just said, I want to be one of the girls. Don't we all want to be one of the girls? You know what that means? We just want to be one of the girls. And I wanted to be one of the girls. And I went to those meetings for 3 years, and I barely said a word. I said yes and no and did a lot of sign language. Got my coffee, and I chatted a bit. But if I was called upon, I would never have spoken. But one time, oh man, these girls went off for 40 minutes on what color blue to have for a tablecloth. And it was very, what color blue should we have? Should we have robin's egg blue? How about blue? Baby blue? Bonnie Bluebell blue? Sky blue? Cornflower blue? Blue for 40 minutes, and I just snapped. And I just said, ladies, you've been doing this for 40 minutes. Now, we got to move on. Moving on. The whole room got deadly quiet. Somebody said, she speaks. June started speaking in tongues. She raised her hands and said, it's a miracle. Okay, it really didn't happen that way, but that's how I felt it happened. But the true part of this was that Kay said to me, Karyn, I've never heard you say so many words in one sentence connected. I said, well, it was the blue stuff. You know, you guys just wouldn't stop with the blue. With the blue. But back in the 80s, we had some weird therapy things. And one of them was called the biofeedback machine. And that's where you would go in and you'd hook your hand up to the machine, like this. Then they would turn it on and it would measure your heart rate and your blood pressure. So the lady hooks me up and she goes, now I want you to think of your greatest fear. What is that? I said, oh, speaking at the pastor's wise retreat. That would be my greatest fear. She goes, okay, start thinking about it, and we'll measure your heart rate. So I'm thinking about it, starting to sweat. I felt the perspiration coming out, and I was breathing heavily. She turns off the machine. I go, well, what happened? She goes, well, you just had a heart attack and died. I said, was it that bad? She goes, I had to turn it off. You were getting pretty, charged up with all this. And I said, okay, well, you're going to turn it back on? And she looked at me and she said, I can't help you. She goes, I've never seen anything like this before. I literally can't help you. I said, okay. So as I'm driving home, I knew there was only one way out. It was a horrible thought. I remember being at church, talking to one of our pastors, Pastor Glenn, and he said, Karyn, how are you? And I said these words, and these words became something that the enemy used against me. I looked at him and I said, Glenn, it's hopeless. And when I said those words, the enemy he took me. He goes, that's right. It's hopeless. It's hopeless. And all this can stop. You can be at rest, and you can have peace. And one night I remember thinking about the exit and how I was going to do it. But I was afraid because I didn't want to leave my kids. But then I had other horrible thoughts about that. And when I thought those thoughts, I thought, boy, I really need help. I need help. And there is no one to help me but the Lord. And although I never related what the Lord shared with me to this story, I remember the Lord said to me very clearly, Karyn, don't you know that the needs of your ladies are greater than your fear? I thought, I know that, but the fear just won't stop. But as a nurse, I knew if I came upon the scene of an accident, you check everybody to see if they're breathing. And if everybody's breathing, what do? What do? You stop the bleeding. You stop the bleeding. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stop the bleeding. Listen, I was fearless as a nurse. At 15 years old, I was a candy striper at White Memorial Hospital in LA. I was such a good candy striper that they put me in the emergency room. That would never happen today. We didn't have air conditioning back then in the hospitals. Back then, you just opened the windows. And I remember a patient came in completely covered with glass. She had gone through the windshield. And the nurses came up and said, Karyn, can you help her? And I said, what can I do? She said, your job is to put her hand in a basin and pour water over her arm and make sure the blood don't touch the glass, because she was covered with glass. Just rinse off the blood off of her arm. I was 15 years old. But I did it, and it didn't bother me at all. I wanted that girl back. That's the little girl I wanted back. I wanted to be healed. Mark 5:27, that this bleeding lady heard that Jesus was in her town or in her area, on her street. And it says she pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And Jesus, she goes up to him from the behind. Now, we've heard a lot of stories about Jesus going to people. This is a woman, she's going to Jesus. And she pushes and she falls down and she touches the hem of his garment. And instantly she's healed. And Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me? Who touched me?" The disciples said, "Well, there's a multitude of people here. They're thronging you. What do you mean, who touched me?" He said, "I felt power leave me." And he turns around, and like Sandy said, he sees her. He looks down and he sees her. He looks at her. Her fountain of blood, it said, stopped. She was immediately healed. The best part that for me when I would read this story was Luke 8:47. Jesus sees her, that she's no more hiding. See, when we're dealing with issues, what do? We hide. We don't want to be honest with people. We don't want them to know our issue. We don't want to tell people the truth because they'll think we're unspiritual. No more hiding. That's such a blessing. And in fear and trembling, she falls at the Lord's feet. And in the presence of the whole crowd, she tells Jesus why she touched him, and now she's healed. She goes from being unclean, not being able to touch anybody, not being able to be a part of society. She's not hiding anymore. And now she's giving Jesus and the whole crowd her testimony. Is that wild? Unclean testimony. That's the power of being healed, of becoming whole. It's not just being healed. This woman had become whole. Jesus says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you whole." And she left in peace. The healing made her bold and brave. Not brassy, not being pushy, not being bossy, but this healing made her bold and brave. But even being healed, she had a lot to do, didn't she? Because healing's a good thing. But she had to go home and just clean out her house of all these things. Just like the man at the pools of Bethesda. Pick up your bed. Hey, come on, get rid of this stuff. Pick up your bed and walk. She had to go home. She had a lot of things that she had to do at home. I remember when the Lord touched me and healed me, I still had a lot of stuff I had to deal with. I still had a lot of little things I had to kind of play around with. I was still a little bit afraid. But I just remember how I'd go to these meetings and Kay would look at me and she'd go, the meeting would be almost over, and she goes, "Karyn, everybody's doing something. Is there anything you can do? Anything?" And I go, I don't know. And she goes, "Well, would you think about it?" And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll think about it. And I came back with this crazy idea of doing plays at the Pastor's Wives Retreat. Because, I had this background in drama, and Kay goes, "Oh, okay." She just was so open. She was just so open to seeing that I was trying. I was like the woman with the issue of blood. I was going to the doctor. I was really trying. I was pushing through. But I still was in fear and trembling a bit. And then I came up with some other ideas, and I won't get into them, but they were silly. And I go, "Kay, can I do this?" And she goes, well, I guess. And I did it, and it worked, and I felt myself getting stronger. I was getting better. The Lord said, "Karyn, the needs of the ladies are greater than your fear. Fear is such a sick focus on self. Ladies, please see that. Please, don't want sympathy for your fear. Don't want sympathy for your situation. Don't want all this stuff that you can talk about. It's just self. It's just self. And we got to lay it down. The needs of the ladies are greater than your fear. My old prayer partner, Ruth, she was an older lady that came to our prayer meeting on Friday, and I remember complaining, this is how self works, because it's very unreasonable. It's very selfish. The entire parking lot was full of cars at the ladies' Bible study, and I was teaching that day. And I just go, oh, great. I mean, gosh, they're here to hear me, and I'm scared. And so we went into the prayer room, and Ruth goes, well, Karyn, can I pray for you? And I said, yes, just pray for me. She goes, oh, Jesus, will you please help Karyn to get her eyes off of herself? Oh, gosh, what a 2x4 on the side of the head that was. I knew that I was selfish, that fear was selfish, but to hear an old prayer warrior like Ruth say that, Karyn, you're so full of yourself. Aren't you glad the parking lot's full of women and you're griping? And I just had to repent. But all through these little things, I was getting better. Little tricks and things. You heard me share last year about the prayer meetings. I could not speak with the lights on. And I would have prayer meetings in the dark. And the women would come in and go, why is it so dark in here? And I had a little night light. And I go, well, it's because in Rome, I use this one a lot. In Rome, they prayed in the catacombs. And it was dark in there. And they go, well, what's that got to do with us? And then I would do this. Oh, we have to pray. I was getting better, though. And then I left the door open. And then I read a chapter. I remember reading half a chapter in Psalms, and my throat closed up. And then I had a friend that I would just go, oh, and Linda, will you continue with the... And then one time I read the whole chapter. And then I had a woman who was a Aaron, that I shared a little bit last night. And I always was saying, I think I'm getting better. I think I can do the ladies' Bible study the day before when we go over the study. I said, I think I can do this because I'm just reading the question and they're answering, so I'm just reading. And so I said, I think I can start taking over these meetings. And she said to me, no, you can't. You're not well enough. I go, no, I really think I can do this. Well, she had to go. Eventually, I had to let her go because she wasn't seeing that I was getting better, and she wasn't for me. She wanted the women's ministry, and I let her have it. Well, I let her have it, but I also let her have it. It was my fault that I did this. And I remember watching her car go out of the driveway and turning left. I'll never forget it. And I thought, I'm free. I'm free. It took a while. Fear would raise its ugly head. But like Corrie ten Boom would share about the story about the bell ringer. Maybe some of you know Corey. I love Corey Tinboon. She knew a little boy who was a bell ringer at the church. Had the big rope, and he'd ring the bell and ring the bell and ring the bell, and then he'd let go of the rope. But what happens? The bell still rings for a while, doesn't it? But he let go. But the bell still rang a while. That's what happened with me. I let go of the rope. I let go of the issue. I wasn't bleeding anymore. But the fear bell rang a few times, and then it just stopped. Teaching ladies' Bible studies, I would shake so badly, and I just would do this in front of the ladies. Excuse me, leave me alone. I'm not stopping. And I just go on. Strange? I don't know, it just worked for me. And then I did a test one day. I said, I'm going into the market. I'm going to go smell the fruit. And I went by myself, and I drove to Ralph's. And I went to the fruit section. I picked up a banana, and I started sniffing it, and the apples. And I closed my eyes because I thought, I'm going to make me have a panic attack. And I start sniffing the fruit, the bananas, and I open my eyes, and everybody's staring at me. And I just started laughing. I go, I just really like fruit. And I started laughing because that was a victory. I could smell the banana. These 3 days, we've talked a lot about letting go, stopping the bleeding, Jesus healing the women, Jesus finding them finding Jesus, and now we're getting ready for communion. And I can share this, ladies. It is the prayer of our hearts, this board, Sharon. And I can say this, please, if you haven't let go of this issue, if you're still bleeding even a little bit, I know that Sharon would say, those crystal clear waters are so beautiful. You do want to go there, and we do. But we have to let this go. We're pastors' wives. These are the last days. We don't have a lot of time for this nonsense anymore. Stop it. Just stop it. And if you're still dealing with it, don't you go out those doors with this, because I want you to know if you do, you're being willfully disobedient. The Lord's been speaking to you. Now Jean's coming up. We're going to have communion. You still have time. It's our prayer that you leave here after you touch his robe. Thank you.
And I've thought of that so much. What was it about Mary that was different? And I just feel it was something in her heart. It was something spiritual, that Mary was just pure before the Lord, that she just loved the Lord, and he loved her back, and he chose her, and he gave her his son to raise. How amazing is that? How wonderful to have God's favor.